United States. So I'm reading from there. Oh, no, this is a little thing before he left. Govinda Dasi made Prabhupada his favorite food, kachoris, to take on the plane. Prabhupada had taught her how to cook them. One of the secrets was to put the kachoris into hot ghee once so they puffed up, but then cool them and recook them in the ghee. Cook them twice, he said, until it becomes reddish. As she cooked them, and while they were still hot, Prabhupada wanted to try one. When he began asking for one after another, Govinda Dasi said, Prabhupada, you're going to eat them all, and you won't have any for your journey. Never mind, he replied, bring me more. Never mind my journey. According to Govinda Dasi, he ate 8 kachoris, and she made more for his journey. Yeah, and you know that Prabhupada, one of Prabhupada's nicknames as a little boy was Kachori Mukhi. He kept kachoris in all the pockets of his vest and pants, and he loved kachoris. Now this is Janavadasi speaking. The next day, His Divine Grace was leaving for Montreal, so I was told to make the garland for him. I took too long and made it on thin thread. We were already late, but I made us even later in picking up His Divine Grace to take him to the airport. You want to try to avoid that. If you have to try to be ready on time if you're going anywhere with your spiritual master. Uh, when we arrived at his apartment about 1/2 hour from the temple, Harsharani ran out of the apartment and told us that she had never seen him so furious. She warned us that we were really going to get it for being late. Then Govinda Dasi came out and confirmed what Harsharani said. Then Kartikeya came out, visibly shaken, followed by His Divine Grace. Instead of garlanding him, Upendra bowed down and with shaking hands held the garland above his bowed head. He was scared. His Divine Grace simply put on the garland, and without a word of remonstration, got into the van. This is Narayan speaking. Bilva Mangal didn't know how to drive. He was the driver. He wasn't a good driver. He was swaying this way and that way. And as we were going toward the downtown area, Prabhupada said, who knows how to get to the airport? We all looked at each other. Not one of us had ever been to the Seattle airport, and it was late for his plane. I said, I think it's this way. Prabhupada looked at me sharp as a razor blade and said, think? Think means you do not know. Finally, there was an entrance onto the highway, and I stopped there. Prabhupada said, I want to take a taxi. You do not know. He said heavier things than that, which my mind has blocked out. I stopped and I said, Srila Prabhupada, let's wait a moment. Surely we will find a way. I quickly called out the window to a hitchhiker on the side of the highway. I quickly called out the window to and said, which way is it to the airport? And he told us how to get there. Prabhupada was angry because he not only liked to be at the airport on time, but ahead of time by at least an hour. So we got on the freeway, and this boy obviously did not know how to drive. The car was swaying and rocking back and forth like a boat. in a heavy storm, and Prabhupada was looking disturbed. I was sitting in the back, and to make matters worse, every time the car swayed like that, the girls put their hands together and started chanting Tava Kara Kamala Varenaka Adbhuta Stringa. We drove on, and by the grace of Lord Krishna, we got to the airport a half hour ahead of the flight. Janavadasi. When we got into the airport, His Divine Grace stepped through the front doors, and immediately his knee-length garland on the thin thread broke, and he simply cradled the two fallen ends in his arms and walked on with great dignity, his head held high and tilted back. Then the devotees gave me petals to throw at his feet. I thought that we would disturb the airlines by leaving the petals everywhere. I threw the petals clumsily because I was distracted by my doubt until His Divine Grace said, "That's all right, no more petals." Then when we were sat waiting for the flight, I was pretty morose at his feet. He looked down and spoke that familiar blessing. Is everything all right? Then the devotees gave me a particularly exquisite and fragrant red rose to give to him. As he boarded the plane, he kept the rose and gave his garland to Upendra to distribute. Although I had only been a devotee for a month, still I too was faced with the unbearable separation from reciprocating with him in his physical form. So that's the essence of Krishna consciousness. If you're with your spiritual master and he leaves and you feel unhappy, or in her case, unbearable, faced with the unbearable separation from reciprocating with him in his physical form. That's exactly what Krishna consciousness is. The obvious example is the gopis when Krishna left Vrindavan, and they tried to stop him, stand in front of his cart, but he left anyway, and they stood looking after him, just standing like statues until they couldn't see his cart anymore. And I think they still kept standing there. So that's perfect Krishna consciousness. There's nothing better than that in Krishna consciousness. His Divine Grace sat by the window and he waved the long-stemmed rose slowly, and then he ducked out of view while we were dancing and having ecstatic kirtan. Then he came back to the window and waved the rose, and then ducked out of sight again. He did this several times, and we responded each time with more forceful chanting and dancing. Then he left. So he was very angry on the car ride, but then as soon as everything settled down, he was perfectly peaceful and calm, and he comforted his disciple because she was upset, and he said, "Is everything all right?" And many times Prabhupada would do things like that with his disciples if they were upset or disturbed, and he would tell them, he would say, you have no problem. And the fact of the matter is that as long as we stay steady in Krishna consciousness, we have no more problems. Material world is nothing but problems, and they never go away, or one problem turns into another and another and another. But in the spiritual world, in Krishna consciousness, you have no problems. You're on your way back home, back to Godhead, for sure. And okay, and this is October 27th, 1968. Prabhupada was traveling alone when he arrived in Chicago on a morning flight from Montreal. Inside the busy terminal building of O'Hare Airport, people rushed down the corridors or looked anxiously at the airport television screens overhead to find the right gate. Prabhupada was to immediately catch a connecting flight to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Prabhupada checked the overhead television screens for his flight's gate number and made his way down the crowded corridor. The rush and congestion made stopping, even for a moment, hazardous. As Prabhupada headed down the long corridor, passers-by eyed him curiously. He came to a flight of stairs and started quickly down them, moving with the crowd. In those days, it wasn't all moving walkways and escalators up and down. It was, you walked everywhere and you climbed up and down stairs. I'm sure there were some escalators, but apparently not here. Uh, Suddenly, he tripped and lost his balance. He dropped his bag and fell down several stairs. He didn't get up. His hand was cut, and he felt pain in several places. Then a gentleman came, helped him stand, and handed him his bag. That's very dangerous, falling down the stairs, even for a young person. But for an elderly person, it's extremely dangerous to fall down any stairs at all. Could easily break bones or anything can happen. His hand was cut and he felt pain in several places. Then a gentleman came, helped him stand, and handed him his bag. The stream of passengers continued to rush past while the gentleman waited, asking Prabhupada if he was all right. Prabhupada thanked the man and said that he would be able to proceed by himself, in pain, of course. On the plane for Santa Fe, Prabhupada looked at his hand. The cut had bled a little, but had now stopped, and he saw a bruise appearing. When Prabhupada arrived at the Montreal airport, a reporter had asked him, "Swami, in the course of your travels, what difficulties do you encounter?" And Prabhupada had replied, "I have no difficulties. You have difficulties." You could say, what do you mean? You no difficulties. You fell down the stairs and are in pain and you cut your hands. What do you mean you have no difficulties? You've had heart attacks. You had a stroke. But but Prabhupada, of course, is not on the bodily platform. It's completely transcendental in the spiritual world at all times. And so he has no difficulties. And we should be like that too. We are like that too. Our difficulties are ephemeral. They're all Maya's leftovers from our conditioning and Maya's tricks, thinking that we have so many problems. And from the material point of view, of course, we do have problems, but the devotees are not in the material realm anymore. We're in Krishna's realm. Krishna's directly taking care of us. And any difficulties that we face, we should see as directly coming from Krishna for our purification. And they're only problems for our material bodies and minds. But the only real problem is if something was hindering us from going back to Godhead. Nothing can hinder our progress in devotional service. So the fact of the matter is that we really don't have any substantial problems. We only have transitory Maya problems or false identification with the body and mind problems, material mind problems. But we're also under Krishna's direct protection as neophyte devotees. Should be confident of that. And it was a fact. Prabhupada was simply depending on Krishna, and so he had no problems. That had also been Prahlad Maharaj's prayer. O best of the great personalities, I am not at all afraid of material existence, for wherever I stay, I am fully absorbed in thoughts of your glories and activities. My concern is only for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness and maintaining their families, societies, and countries. I am simply concerned with love for them. We try to see it in that way as much as possible. And therefore we preach. We preach out of obedience to our spiritual master who has that mentality fully. And as much as possible, we should see all problems in that light too. We don't have any real problems, but we're concerned with everyone else who is still in Maya's grip, who are actually suffering. The reporter, however, had only written something foolish. Hush puppied high priest. I don't think I've read this before to you, have I? I've read it to other people, but I'm just a little worried that I read it in this group before. Do you remember me reading this before?
No, bro. Uh,
All right.
no, bro.
I've read it to other people. I lose track of who I'm reading it to. Uh, a television news team with cameras and lights had come to the Seattle temple to interview Prabhupada, and that night of the interview had been televised. It had been favorable coverage. A Christian minister, however, a Mr. Miller from the University of Washington, had written in protest of Prabhupada's preaching at the university. But Prabhupada had replied that the church had failed, the Christian church had failed to satisfy so many boys and girls. So if some of them were following him and giving up sinful life, why should the Christians protest? They should be glad. They should be glad. The goal is to make people God conscious in their according to their scriptures, but the American kids weren't, in general, mostly weren't taking their religion very seriously at all. So if they came to Prabhupada and he made them very serious about surrendering to God, then why should their ministers be upset? I mean, just out of false ego that they think, oh, we couldn't do it, but no, we couldn't be successful. But look at this Swami from India, he's successful. So they're a little envious, kind of envious, and they protested. But why should they protest? They should be glad. At the Albuquerque airport, that's Albuquerque in New Mexico, in the southwest United States, Harinam, president of the Santa Fe Temple, and Govinda Dasi met Prabhupada, but they greeted him with strange news. Prabhupada, Govinda Dasi said, the temple here has no money. You can't stay. You will have to go on to Los Angeles. Prabhupada turned to Harinam. Why did you ask me to come here? Harinam glanced at Govinda Dasi and then shifted his foot, which seemed to be causing him pain. He apologized and explained that the night before he had been bitten by a black widow spider. It's a type of poisonous spider. But Prabhupada's question was unanswered. Prabhupada said, "Why'd you invite me here?" And he says, well, he's trying to think of what to say. He's really, really nervous, of course. And he just said, the first thing that he said, "Prabhupada, I got bit by a spider last night and it really hurts." But that wasn't exactly what Prabhupada wanted to hear. He wanted him to answer his question. "So what are you going to do?" Prabhupada demanded. "I can't go to Los Angeles tonight." He looked from Harinam to Govindadasi. "I must stay here in Albuquerque, at least for the night, in a hotel." Govindadasi assigned herself to calling motels to find a suitable, reasonably priced room. While she was gone, Harinam found Prabhupada a seat. Govindadasi said, "You are not feeling well," Harinam said. "Don't worry about my health," Prabhupada said. "I am not a sick man. Govindadasi is sick. I am not sick. So what are you going to do?" Govindadasi returned and said she couldn't find any reasonable motels. Back then, the most expensive hotel was probably like $75 for a night. So they were definitely cheap hotels, but they really didn't have much money. And most of the devotees back, they couldn't even afford a cheap hotel. Krishna, oh wait, she couldn't find any reasonable motels. Then she began to cry. Krishna, Prabhupada, she pleaded. What does Krishna want us to do? And that is not the point, Prabhupada said angrily. Krishna wants to know what you want to do. Krishna expects us to think about situations and try to find good solutions to problems, and not that we're independent, but Krishna wants us to show some initiative and to be, to really take some initiative. Harinam, disgusted with Govindadasi's attitude, suddenly became decisive. "I think we should go to Santa Fe," he said. Prabhupada agreed. It seemed like the only thing to do. Getting into the temple Volkswagen at 4 in the afternoon, they started the 60-mile drive from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. The clouds overhead formed unusual symmetrical patterns on either side of the road. "I have never seen the clouds looking so beautiful as today," Harinam said. An hour and a half later, as they pulled into the driveway of the little storefront building, Prabhupada noticed a handmade sign. "Swamiji is coming." "Yes," he said, and he smiled, his first expression of pleasure since arriving in New Mexico. "You were expecting me." Coming in. What? Coming in through the back door, Prabhupada, escorted by Harinam, entered a newly painted room. A rug partially covered the linoleum floor. A wooden table was an altar, and a madras-covered wooden crate, with a pillow was Prabhupada's seat. Pretty fancy Vyasasan they had back then, just a wooden box with a cloth on top of it. But that's what they had. That's all they had. Prabhupada, however, chose to sit on the rug instead of the crate, and the devotees and guests sat around him. "This is a nice room," Prabhupada said, looking around. "I will stay here." Govindadasi brought Prabhupada a plate of cut fruit, and Prabhupada opened a lunch bag containing laddu and kachuris. about 8 guests, hippies, were present, and Prabhupada distributed prasadam to everyone. One of the guests, never having tasted laddu before, remarked, "This is the best peanut butter I've ever eaten." And I'll tell you, for distribution, prasadam distribution in the United States, one of the best things to distribute is laddus. Everybody really likes them. And they always say that tastes like peanut butter. And of course, it is a fantastic sweet. And this is the preparation, Prabhupada explained, that the mothers make for Krishna and the friends of Krishna to take with them in their lunch bags. They put this in their lunch bags when they go and play. One of the guests asked Prabhupada, "Who is Krishna?" Krishna, Prabhupada replied, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is playing with the cowherd boys. Prabhupada asked to spend the night in the Santa Fe storefront, but the devotees told him that as the heater was too loud, he would be more comfortable staying in an apartment nearby. He complied. Harinam assigned a recently initiated boy, Toshan Krishna, to be Prabhupada's servant. When Toshan Krishna is still a devotee living in Florida, in the Alachua area, still active in ISKCON. When Prabhupada got to his room and found it dark, Toshan Krishna had to replace the burned out bulb in the ceiling socket. When the light came on, Prabhupada looked around the room and found it practically bare. There was a mattress on the floor, but no pillow. There was no desk, so Prabhupada made his own desk by setting his books on his suitcase, a wooden chest a devotee in Seattle had built. "So," Prabhupada said, "do you know how to type?" "No," Toshan Krishna said. Prabhupada was unable to sleep that night because of the glare from the street lamp. So I guess no curtain on the window, and the street lamp was right outside his window. So he sat at his desk writing purports for the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. As he wrote, his pen scratched with a hollow sound across the wooden suitcase. Toshan Krishna took rest in another room while Prabhupada went on writing all night, his pen scratching on the hollow wooden desk. Then at 4 a.m, Prabhupada rang the little bell Toshan Krishna had left with him and called Toshan Krishna. Like if I couldn't sleep because the light was shining in the window and I couldn't fall asleep, it would disturb my mind, and I would try to find some way to cover the window or some way to fall asleep and get some rest. But Prabhupada, he's like, well, I can't sleep, so I'll just stay up all night and write purports. So, yeah. And in the very last year of his life, one time Prabhupada told his disciples, when he practically couldn't eat anything and could hardly sleep at night, he said to one of his disciples, he said, "You're getting really good service out of me. I can't eat, I can't sleep, but still I'm going on taking care of you." That was Prabhupada. Faced with difficulties, he just found another way to serve Krishna. We should try to be like that too, although I know my mind gets disturbed, and generally our minds get disturbed, but we should try to not let the disturbance in our mind overcome us too much, be too influential on our consciousness. So Prabhupada said, he rang the bell and he called Toshan Krishna. Toshan Krishna came running. Yes, Prabhupada, it is 4:00, Prabhupada said. You should get up. At this time in ISKCON, of course, there still wasn't any regular Mangal Arti, any regular morning program, and probably he wasn't used to getting up that early. But Prabhupada said, it's 4:00, you should get up. Toshan Krishna, the devotees were getting up early, but not like 3 or 4 in the morning. Toshan Krishna had to run to the door without his glasses, so he hurried back to get them. He then ran back again to Prabhupada's room and sat down before him. The first thing Prabhupada said is, you haven't paid your obeisances. Toshan Krishna slapped his hand to his head, and Prabhupada began to chuckle. As the boy put his head to the floor in honor of his spiritual master, Prabhupada said, that's all right. It is just for practice. Then Prabhupada spoke sternly. Why have you brought me to Santa Fe and then told me to leave? Toshan Krishna, a devotee only for 2 months, he didn't know what to say. You can imagine, you're just a new devotee, and the old devotees were only devotees for a year or a year and a half, and you're a devotee for 2 months, and Prabhupada is saying, why did you bring me here? And Toshan Krishna is like, I don't know. It's, I don't think he said, it's not my fault, but you can imagine how he was thinking. He didn't know what to, so Govinda, no, then he said, Govinda Dasi, never listen to a woman. Prabhupada smiled as he spoke, but then again he sternly cautioned Toshan, don't laugh. So what did she say? Well, she was concerned about your health because of the altitude. I guess it's a little high altitude. She had talked with some doctors and friends of hers, and she became concerned that the altitude might affect you. As a matter of fact, she was sick herself. As soon as she got here, she became sick. So she convinced Harinam that they should tell you that you shouldn't stay here. And of course, Govinda Dasi had been with Prabhupada for quite a while, but at that time, several months as a personal servant in several different temples. So he knew her very well, and she was very close to Prabhupada. And she took very good care of him. But anyway, she convinced Harinam that they should tell you that you shouldn't stay here. And Prabhupada said, Govinda Dasi will always be sick. She will be sick in heaven. Prabhupada began laughing, but Toshan only looked back nervously. So they think Swamiji will come here and die. Prabhupada gestured towards the window. There are so many people living here. Oh, Prabhupada. Toshan Krishna said, it became cold in the morning, so he told me to turn on all the burners on the stove. He rubbed his head and started singing the prayers to the spiritual master. He half sang and half said them, and when he was done, we both chanted japa together. I knew I was very fortunate. Then he had me do little things like turn off the burners on the stove. Now you can turn one off. Now you can turn another one off. It was getting warmer. Later we went for an early morning walk. I had nothing to ask Prabhupada, since I knew so little of the philosophy. He was telling me that one's fortunate life begins when he meets a devotee. That night, about 40 guests came to the temple, a big increase over the usual attendance. The audience was almost entirely young couples, and Prabhupada talked about Radha and Krishna in a way that seemed most fitting. Radharani is the most beautiful girl, he said, and Krishna is the most beautiful boy. He explained that Radha and Krishna are the perfection of the conjugal relationship. And when that same congregational relationship is exhibited by the conditioned souls in the material world, it is only a perverted reflection. As of course, one of the 10 offenses is not to preach the glories, intimate glories of the Lord to the faithless person. But Prabhupada knew exactly how to present the most intimate aspect of Krishna and Radharani to the faithless persons. And they showed a little bit of faith by coming to hear Prabhupada. Prabhupada describes that Adal Shraddha, he says, just a little bit of faith in the beginning is Adal Shraddha. Just thinking that, oh, these people are talking something about God. Let me go and hear what they have to say. And Prabhupada said that's the beginning. That's a little bit of Shraddha. And everything can develop from there. So they were all young boys and girls, boyfriend and girlfriends together coming to hear Prabhupada. So they're in a perverted relationship, conjugal relationship that Prabhupada talked about. So he presented that most important aspect of Krishna consciousness to them, and he explained it in the most direct way. Basically saying, don't think you're Radharani and Krishna just because you're boyfriend and girlfriend, but you have to understand the difference. And so, and Prabhupada, one of the first books that Prabhupada gave was the Krishna book with the rasa dance, rasa lila in it. That's right there. And the devotees from as soon as the Krishna book came out, they just started distributing it freely everywhere to people. So, but included in the Rasa Lila chapters and all throughout Prabhupada's books, he presents so many things, but he always includes warnings with his in his purports and his lectures about, I'm telling you these things, but don't take them in the wrong way. You have to understand all these things in the correct way by shastric evidence and philosophy. And then anyone with a little bit of faith can hear them and without danger if they take the warnings along with the pastimes. After the lecture, as Prabhupada spoke casually with the guests, an elderly woman introduced herself as the head of the Albuquerque Yoga Club and invited Prabhupada to come there to speak. Prabhupada said he would be happy to come, and turning to Harinam said, we should go. They have invited me. But he said, Harinam said, but they already have another engagement for you in Los Angeles. So Prabhupada ended his short stay in Santa Fe after only one day. But that one day was the most important day. And okay, so this is, when Prabhupada was invited to different things, a yoga club lecture or an television interview, or in Mexico City, when he went there, he was invited to speak on a television show that didn't start very popular television interview show that didn't even start until like 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And Prabhupada had an extremely busy day, all day long, going to different places and preaching all day long. And the disciples told him no, he shouldn't go because he had been so busy all day. And Prabhupada asked them how many people the television show would be broadcast to, and they told him, "Oh, it's a very popular show, and so like several million people would see him." So after a very difficult, tiring day, Prabhupada went at like 12 o'clock at night to be interviewed on this television show. So Prabhupada was always extending himself in all kinds of ways to preach at any opportunity. And we should try to follow that example also. Okay, this is chapter. If anyone wants to say anything along the way, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I'll start reading in chapter 6, entitled 108 Rose Bushes. October 28th, 1968. On returning to Los Angeles from Santa Fe, Prabhupada found his followers in their new location on Hollywood Boulevard in the tourist section, a block from Grauman's Chinese Theater. The new temple, a former beauty parlor, occupied the large first floor of an elegant old 6-story office building. This space, actually tri-level with a ground floor, a mezzanine, and a basement, was filled with more than 40 devotees. This is in 1968 in Los Angeles, very close to when it started. Prabhupada stayed in the Lucky 7 Hotel across the street. In the early evening, before the devotees would go out again to chant, they would crowd into Prabhupada's room and sit with him. Prabhupada had ordered that in every center, his disciples perform public kirtan, and that order was sending the devotees in New York, Boston, and San Francisco to the parks. In LA, the devotees were going out 12 hours a day, chanting Hare Krishna in Hollywood. Prabhupada had simply asked that they go out and chant, but enthusiastic new leaders, Tamal Krishna and Vishnu John, were taking that order to the fullest extent. You know that it's not easy to chant in kirtan even for an hour or 2 hours, or definitely 3 hours. But these devotees were going out chanting 12 hours a day, which to me is amazing. I don't think I could ever have done that. Maybe if Tamal Krishna was there telling me to do it, maybe I would have been able to do it. But anyway, but they were doing it. Prabhupada had ordered, one night Prabhupada came out in a car and parked in front of the kirtan party, watching the chanting and dancing with pleasure. Vishnu John, who had become especially expert on the mridanga, played and led the chanting. The boys wore clean uniform saffron dhotis and the women saffron saris. Tamal Krishna had organized the devotees almost to the point of choreography, and Prabhupada watched as devotees raised their hands and danced back and forth in the Swami step, which he himself had taught. Hundreds of tourists walked along Hollywood and Vine streets, going to the theaters, the wax museum, the CD bars, and the nightclubs. And although sometimes they laughed or made fun of the chanters, they were more often astonished and, at least for a moment, as they stopped in their tracks, delighted. And you find that if there's only a few devotees out there, people don't, mind so much or take notice so much. But mostly they don't think too much about it, at least externally. But if there's like 40 devotees out there chanting and dancing, and it's really fired up kirtan, almost everybody walking by in the United States, they like it because they like it. And oftentimes there's some devotees there who will grab some of the spectators and drag them into the kirtan and make them dance. And they have a great time. And any kirtan is fantastic, and anytime, any place, no matter how many devotees. But if it's like a nice night in the city and there's hundreds of thousands of people walking by and there's a lot of devotees out there chanting in kirtan, people get into it. Just regular American or European people, Australian, anybody, they get into it because there's people there doing something that's really amazing, really unusual. And even people, they don't know what it is, but they can see that these people are really serious and they're having a good time. And they're dancing and chanting and smiling and laughing. And that's attractive to people. And they like it. Almost everyone likes it. Let's see. But to Prabhupada, sitting quietly in the car watching the devotees, the chanting was a benediction on the sleeping souls passing by. He was convinced that everyone on Hollywood Boulevard who heard the chanting was being purified of lifetimes of sinful activities. This was the power of the holy name, and the youthful disciples on the street, energetically singing to Vishnu Jana's beat, were also aware of this. Seeing Srila Prabhupada's car and knowing that he was watching renewed their enthusiasm. To Prabhupada, this kirtan party was only happening by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's blessings. Surely he would be pleased to see this revolutionary phenomenon, the holy name resounding from young American Vaishnavas in the late night of this sinful city. And as Prabhupada was convinced of the blessings of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, so his young followers, knowing their spiritual master was watching them, were similarly convinced by him, and they transcended all fatigue and doubt. Let's see. The devotees' residence on Hollywood Boulevard was short-lived. Their public chanting had already made them a sensation, and the arrival of the Jagannath deities was more than the landlord had bargained for. The other tenants of the building were also disturbed, especially whenever the air conditioning system would pick up the aroma of the chili spiced dal and circulate the fumes throughout the building, causing office workers to gasp and cough. The landlord served an eviction notice. He would return the devotees $450 on the condition that they move themselves and all their belongings from the building that same day. They wouldn't be able to, a landlord wouldn't be able to do that today in the United States. He has to go through the courts and everything. But back then, 60 years ago, the landlords had a lot more freedom to just kick somebody out. Get out today, or I won't give you your deposit your money back. And you'll have to get out anyway tomorrow. The devotees had no choice. They put everything, stove, furniture, rugs, pots and pans, soap, split peas, even Lord Jagannath out on the sidewalk. They had nowhere to go. While the women and children waited for hours amid the paraphernalia on the street, some other devotees managed to rent enough warehouse space for the furniture. Gradually, the devotees relocated in various places. An elderly English lady allowed a few devotees to stay at her house. The brahmacharis found a small house in the Wat. Men went to another place. Dayananda, who had a job and his own apartment, took a few married couples at his place and found an apartment for Prabhupada, Lord Jagannath, and Kartamishan on Hayworth Street. Thus, the devotees of the Los Angeles temple, we're not going through things like that these days, although probably in some places in the world, devotees are still having may face troubles like that. But back then, everything was brand new, and it's good to hear about how things were in the very early days of ISKCON. It's, not that we can ever know everything. You can hear stories about the early days from many different disciples who were there. You can't know everything, but it's good to hear at least something about ISKCON in the very early days. Despite the odd circumstances, they still came together every day for chanting, either on Hollywood Boulevard or in some other Los Angeles area. Prabhupada began visiting the brahmacharis at their house, where he held regular Monday, Wednesday, and Friday lectures. He would lead kirtan, often masterfully playing the mridanga, and his playing would make everyone dance. Nandarani had arranged for Prabhupada to lecture at the Hollywood Vegetarian Society. Do they want to hear about Bhagavad Gita? Prabhupada asked. No, Nandarani replied. They only want to hear about being vegetarian. You tell them Swamiji doesn't, Prabhupada said, you tell them Swamiji doesn't know anything about being vegetarian. Tell them I don't know anything. But if they want to learn about Bhagavad Gita, I know something. And of course, we're devotees are vegetarians. And Prabhupada taught it was a necessity right away to be vegetarian. Although most of the early devotees were, almost all the early devotees were not vegetarian. Yeah, but Prabhupada said, no, tell them Swamiji doesn't know anything about being vegetarian. But if they want to learn about Bhagavad Gita, I know something. And if you listen to me talk about Krishna, then if you take it seriously, then you'll be a vegetarian automatically. That's not in the book. I added that part. That's it. Nandarani called the Vegetarian Society and asked if they wanted to hear about Bhagavad Gita. They didn't. Prabhupada said, and we are interested in lecturing at mundane programs. Even the pigeons are vegetarians. We don't want to be pigeons. We don't care for vegetarian or non-vegetarian. We only care if we can offer it to Krishna. Then we eat. When a reporter for the Cosmic Star newspaper came, Prabhupada, like a hippie newspaper, apparently, the Cosmic Star, Prabhupada talked frankly with him about bogus swamis and avatars, in quotes, avatars, from India. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times interviewed Prabhupada on whether he thought man could land on the moon. Prabhupada told the reporter to note down that the Krishna consciousness movement has nothing to do with going to the moon. The reporter had his own angle, and he printed an article in the December 28th issue of the Los Angeles Times, big newspaper with huge circulation. Swami says people are living on the moon. And this is from the article. If astronauts land on the moon, they probably will be opposed by highly intelligent beings who have been there for 10,000 years. So Prabhupada must have told them about the demigods and the moon being a heavenly planet. So says Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta, spiritual leader of an attention-getting Indian cult that has grown from a few followers 2.5 years ago to groups of initiates in 10 US and Canadian cities. The 72-year-old guru interviewed Friday at the Los Angeles Temple of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, 1975 La Cienega Boulevard, believes, first of all, that there is only a remote chance that man could land on the moon planet. Claiming that his statements were based on Vedic literature, specifically the Srimad Bhagavatam, Swami Bhaktivedanta said present spacesuits would have to be improved. Anyway, this was before the Americans went to the moon, so-called. Anyway, Prabhupada told his disciples that they couldn't have gone to the moon. And of course, I was there in the moon landing in 1970, just before I met the devotees. And everyone took it for granted that they flew to the moon and landed on the moon. And it was just an article of faith in the American people. And then Prabhupada comes along and says, nope, it didn't go to the moon. And some devotees had trouble accepting that. But personally, I didn't. I was like, okay, well, I've accepted so many other things about Krishna and the spiritual world and Maha Mantra and so many things that Prabhupada said and the Srimad Bhagavatam said and Bhagavad Gita says that are so fantastic. Why stop there? Why not? Why not? They didn't go to the moon. Anyway, it wasn't, Prabhupada didn't consider it a very important point. Sometimes I think he might have talked about that. Often people were asking him about it all the time once they heard his views. But Prabhupada would answer them. And sometimes I think he just talked about it because it would draw people's attention and then he could preach more about surrendering to Krishna. It's not a very significant point whether we went to the moon or not. You can go to the moon if you want. In your next life, you can be a demigod and be born on the moon or any other planet of the demigods. It's not a very significant point. But it did give Prabhupada many opportunities to do interviews with newspapers and to preach about Krishna. If you interview him, he wouldn't just talk about that. He would maybe start with that and then go into quoting verses from the Bhagavad Gita and telling everyone they should chant Hare Krishna, surrender to Krishna. So it's not a very important point, but it's something that Prabhupada had to deal with because it was what was happening back then in American culture. And everyone believed it. Anyway, I'll stop about there. Anyone want to say anything? Any questions or comments? You can ask. It's okay if you don't. I know you're getting ready for school or work or tomorrow. Today is a busy day for you. I'm just going to go to bed. All right, then. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, let us thank His Nityananda Prabhu for blessing us. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare
Shall I be chanting 3 times? Haribo!
Haribo!
Hare
Haribo!
Hare
Haribo! Thank you
Hare
so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank
Srila Prabhupada ki
thank
jai.
you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu ki jai. Hare
Devahuti. Ah,